2:00 a.m., October 20th, 2025, Caribbean Sea. The water is black as oil, the sky heavy and breathless, and the shipping lanes look empty until they don't. A P-8A Poseidon cuts the cloud deck and paints the surface in infrared. 5 heat signatures emerge in tight formation, no AIS, no names, navigation lights cold. Each hull flies a false humanitarian flag and spits a polite lie into the ether spoof transponder IDs that resolve to nobody and nowhere. The first pass reads as noise. The second shapes into a hypothesis. By the third, it's geometry lines stitched to a destination that's pretending not to exist. Whatever is coming isn't relief. It's intent wearing a mask. In CIC, the plot has room to breathe. Operators call out bearings as if they're reading a prayer. The EO/IR turret on the Poseidon scrubs the night for edges bows. Draped in heat blanket tarps, engine rooms venting a slow breath deck cargo dressed up as aid pallets. The convoy isn't sloppy, it's curated. Ships hold 12 knots in north by northwest, matching wakes, as if tied by unseen rope, keeping station at ranges that complicate any single ship interdiction. They're borrowing safety from each other. They're also daring the United States to pick the wrong fight on the wrong frame. Far to the west, the USCGC Hamilton answers a call it doesn't need to hear twice. Engines wind. The bow begins to talk to the water in a language that means business. On the bridge, Commander Del Spencer isn't looking for hero shots. He's looking for angles. The cutter's Mk-110 57mm gun comes to a respectful standby. No flourish, just the muscle memory of a mount that knows how to take a breath. Mk-38, Mod 3 stations, check glass. 50 cal mounts get a quiet tap of knuckles. The LRAD powers on for the first sentence you hope you don't need to shout. Above them, a MH-60R Seahawk moves into a racetrack orbit, keeping altitude and posture. That read witness more than warning, the GAU-21 at the door, a punctuation mark that doesn't need to speak. Higher still, a MQ-9 Reaper takes the long view glass, steady at 20,000 feet, the laser designator cold. The rules of engagement taped to the crew's bones. On the P-8A's console, the IR isn't just hot, it's curated heat. You can see where someone tucked a generator under a foil shroud to keep the thermal picture honest, where a deck gun is sleeved but not silent, where a coil of cable marks a sling for cargo that never goes to hospital docks. Cartel logistics teams studied our eyes and designed a night that looks like charity from far away and breaks into confession at 5 to 7 nautical miles. They also studied our temper. That's why the hails are pre-scripted legalese, printed on laminated cards for the men with radios and for the men who will pretend not to hear them. Blue Current, this is Hamilton. The VHF voice is steady enough to flatten waves. You are operating without required signals and within an active interdiction box. Heave to for inspection. The first reply is silence. The second is a tiny burst of encrypted data that has the rhythm of a heartbeat and the tone of contempt. The escorts shift by 2 degrees, subtle as a shrug. The Seahawk dips 20 feet, swings the spotlight over railings like a searchlight in a library. No glare, no drama, just enough candle power to make a camera honest. A second hail follows, then a third each, a rung on the non-lethal ladder. Hail, show, record, reposition. It's the metronome of people who know the value of a tape that can stand up in court. The convoy's counterscript starts with spoofing. AIS pips flash and die like nervous fish. A sister contact appears on a parallel lane for 40 seconds. Perfect speed, perfect course, the kind of ghost that eats patrol hours if you let it. Hamilton doesn't. The Poseidon's SAR sweep throws a skin on the lie. The Reaper's glass refuses to blink. The decoy sinks back into the algorithmic ooze it came from, and the 5 real hulls keep breathing diesel into the night. Now the escorts get loud. One deck crew rips canvas from a gun that's half museum, half menace. 12.7mm mounted behind plastic shields that don't fool anyone. Another crew shoulders a shape no boarding team likes to see, RPG-7 with a warhead that wants containers for breakfast and hulls for dessert. Over VHF, Hamilton repeats the warning slower for the record. The Seahawk shifts to a beam that is part spotlight, part sentence. The camera is awake. The world is watching. The 50 cal at the door stays down and ready. The Seahawk pilots adjust their geometry, no proud nose. On that invites a panic shot, just profile passes that deny angles while keeping posture. The Reaper climbs a hair to keep Cloud Edge honest and plays librarian to 1,000 frames of movie the cartel was never going to enjoy. Minimal risk posture, weapons cold. Spencer doesn't say it loud, but the ship hears him. The MK-110 holds its ready bearing. MK-38 optics stay on a face, not a chest. LRAD clears its throat. The green laser dazzler waits in reserve, a legal flashcard that can turn bravado into eyes squeezed shut. On USS Delbert D. Black over the horizon, SPY-1D Phi observes like a cathedral. SLQ-32 writes a diary of every emitter that blinks, and the Aegis console keeps a courteous distance from lethal, while the law sets the table. If it goes wrong, the umbrella's there. SR-BOC Chaff Nulka, if cruise missile rumor becomes fact ESSM further out. But nothing in the convoy's grammar looks like a shooter that can survive grown-up attention. The danger here is not missiles, it's mistakes. At 2:23 a.m., the Reaper picks up a small hot cough from the lead freighter, a little heat that doesn't belong, a diesel-driven reactor tucked into a compartment labeled water filtration. The camera drinks the label. The database drinks the serials next to it. A chain of custody is born in the sky. On the second hull, a tarp slips when a deckhand takes a corner too fast, and the frame exposes more Mandarin than Mercy lithium reaction cores, pressure fittings, export control codes, printed as though the sender didn't know the word indictment. The escorts decide to probe. A boat begins a clumsy crossing the T toward Hamilton's bow, a schoolyard puck check that can turn anybody stupid if Pride is at the helm. Pride is not at this helm. The cutter eases 3 degrees steel's closing speed and turns the intercept into a math problem the escort can solve without losing face. The VHF script stays clean. The LRAD barks a single sentence that hurts just enough to be remembered. The green laser whispers into the escort's bridge windows, the way a teacher underlines a word rather than raises a hand. The escort blinks and falls back into the pack, like a child called by name. Under the smoke, under the foil, under the flags and fictions, there's a steady pulse of weapons. One escort crew has a PKM belt hung from a nail like a holiday. Another cradles a tube that no one says out loud until they must man pads warn and suspect, but not to be laughed at. The Seahawk reads the silhouette and slides out to a profile range that turns panic into futility. The Reaper's altitude makes the tube a museum piece. Hamilton's MK-38 turret paints the carrier with a square so small, the operator's finger ticks tighter on the grip by reflex and then relaxes because the trigger discipline in front of him is a mirror he's not ready to break. Through all of it, the kill chain never pretends to be opera. It's plumbing. P8A feeds, Hamilton closes, DDG 119 records. MH60R documents. MQ9 waits with a pocket of quiet violence it may never be asked to spend. Every 90 seconds, the picture gets cleaner. Every minute, the choices get fewer. The convoy is now a corridor in motion, and corridors are things professionals know how to close. Blue current package, confirmed, the watch officer says, and the room answers by not moving. Spencer checks the clock, not the horizon. We stay on the script, he says, the way you tell a boxer to keep his hands up when the crowd screams for a haymaker. Minimal risk posture, weapons cold. The ship obeys like a living creature. The escorts test one last story. They light navigation lamps that aren't legal lamps at all, a Christmas tree of mismatched colors designed to confuse a screenshot. The Seahawk fixes them with light that tells no lies. The Poseidon's IR turns their cleverness into ink. The Reaper marks 2 faces as if it were memorizing them for a lineup. The second hail goes out again, the third after it, the fourth like a clock that knows its own hands. Heave to for inspection. In the silence, you can hear the convoy think about it. And then the sea changes. It isn't the water. It's the human temperature riding on it. A deckhand glances aft and keeps glancing. A man with a radio stops pretending and starts listening. A gunner who raised his weapon to be seen lowers it for balance. The convoy knows finally that this isn't a chase. It's an audit. Audits don't get tired, they get closer. 2:47 a.m. USCGC Hamilton bends to the intercept. Engines rise, deck lights flare, and a mixed-team Navy sailors Coast Guard boarding cruise, DEA Shadow 6 agents fans, out across consoles and hatches. Above the cutter, an MH-60R Seahawk takes its orbit. Higher still, the Poseidon rides a racetrack and an MQ-9 Reaper locks its glass at $20,000 FT. On the Hamilton's Bridge, Commander Dale Spencer watches the tactical plot build a corridor out of darkness. 5 contacts course north by northwest, speed 12 knots tight, station keeping, like ships that know they're being watched and are daring you to blink. The convoy ignores hails. The VHF script hail safety advisory, legal assertion, and final instruction plays out in steady tone. No answer. Minimal risk posture stays in the loop, cameras up, weapons cold. 3:09 a.m. The first cartel deck gun breaks the quiet. Red tracers arc and evaporate in mist. Hamilton's bow turret answers with the sound of a steel door slamming, Mk 110, 57 milli-unit short surgical bursts that tear gun mounts away from their bravado. Fire stutters. Minimal lethal response, Spencer says, never raising his voice. We take them alive. For a moment, the sea agrees. Then a second ship detonates, a white-blue flash, chemical drums ripping into atmosphere, sky painted azure, as accelerants go oxygen-rich. Seahawk banks, low GAU-21 in deterrent posture, spotlight carving the hull lines for the camera. Shadow 6 fast ropes to a smoking deck that hisses and bites at boots. Hatches give way. Hands go to rails. Restraints close with the punctuation of policy. Below decks, the surprise is architectural industrial drums labeled in Mandarin lithium reactors, rigged for long-duration chemical synthesis. False customs seals from Venezuelan ports. Documentation that looks more like export control fraud than street crime. A fourth vessel swings wide, then runs hard toward Venezuelan waters, smoke trailing. Target attempting escape. 10,000 feet above the Reaper pivots. A laser box shivers steady and small, and a single AGM-114 Hellfire falls through the humid night. Impact scrubs the wake from the plot. Steam fuels silence. By dawn, the sea is still again, and the horizon smokes like a sermon. 5 ships destroyed or captured. Hundreds of chemical barrels seized. On Hamilton's mess deck, agents start the dull heroics, labeling drums, tagging drives, photographing composite hull fragments with foreign serials, building a chain of custody story that can travel all the way to court without losing a word. 27 arrests, 4 high-value detainees. A headline will call it the largest maritime drug interdiction in U.S. history. On the bridge, the mood is quieter and heavier. Spencer says to his XO what the pictures already know. This wasn't a bust, it was a battle. 8:00 a.m., Cartagena and Barranquilla, Colombia. The maritime fight folds into a land campaign without a seam. Encrypted orders burn across the DEA Joint Command stack. Within minutes, Colombian National Police and DEA teams move in a braided pattern on 2 industrial nodes masked as import firms and charity warehouses. Over the coast, the helicopters thunder. In the streets, armored trucks take corners like decisions. Inside the warehouses, not bricks of product but machines, rows of 3D printers, racks of lithium power cells, cut sheets and models for miniature unmanned submarines, disposable and modular, built to ferry kilograms like letters across salt water. An air-conditioned server room hums, sealed and tireless. When cyber forensics peels the drives, ledgers unwind across Macau, Dubai, Hong Kong. Shell companies in bad suits walk money through offshore corridors. Logistics fronts tilt every invoice toward a country where the rules are more suggestion than law. At Langley, analysts glue this together with a look that isn't triumph. Every wire disappears in a diplomatic fog until a name repeats enough to be undeniable: Colonel Rafael Ortega, Venezuelan intelligence, under U.S. sanctions since 2023. The picture that emerges is not rumor. It's architecture, state protection, foreign logistics, Chinese technology, all converging on Project Azure Reef ocean-based production platforms, synthesizing meth and fentanyl precursors, on-site stabilized by lithium reactors traced back to Shenzhen. Hybrid warfare by any other name, it looks like crime. It behaves like strategy. By afternoon, the National Security Council leans over illuminated maps of the Caribbean, red dots, marking nodes, arrows describing lanes. The DEA briefs first 6 vessels neutralized, 200-plus chemical drums secured, and then yields to Navy. Admiral Kingsley doesn't sell fear, he sells clarity. With respect, sir, he says this wasn't a drug convoy. This was logistics warfare, someone testing how far we'll let them go. A CIA slide follows carbon fiber hulls, modular reactors, composite fuel lines, each stamped with a manufacturer code from a sanctioned Chinese firm, each shipment stamped as marine research equipment and waved through Venezuelan customs like a favor. At Quantico, forensic chemists confirm stabilizers and lithium polymer compounds that don't come from a jungle shed. They come from state-licensed facilities. The Pentagon assessment that lands on the Resolute desk that evening is blunt. The Marquez Rojas network has evolved narcotics trafficking into hybridized conflict aimed not just at profit, but at destabilization, addiction, corruption, influence as tools. It looks like crime, an intel officer says in a voice that knows the price of being right, but it acts like strategy. Evening, Caribbean Sea. The message back to the cutter arrives under encryption and changes one word that changes the season. Operation Blue Current becomes Operation Red Current, continued maritime interdictions, cyber strikes, financial sanctions, a global dragnet that doesn't end at a shoreline. Spencer reads it twice, once as a sailor and once as a citizen, and hands it to the XO without commentary. The fires are out now. The sea is a sheet of smoked glass. The U.S. flag at the stern pops and settles as if it remembers older winds. Divers recover black boxes from the seabed navigation datacom logs, digital receipts that link hulls in the night to a logistics firm in Macau. On the Colombian coast, an armored convoy pushes through the city with Luis Marquez Rojas, heir apparent, in its throat. Philanthropy could not disguise the math on his balance sheet, and money like fuel leaves a smell you cannot wash out. The arrests are counted and logged, the seizures tallied. Over $10 billion in the narcotics and equipment seized or destroyed across sea and shore in a single arc of hours. A country that has too often been the land of aftermath becomes for a day the land of before. And yet the tone in the E-ring is not a cheer. It is the quiet that follows diagnosis. What the teams uncovered isn't just a criminal network. It is the future arriving without an invitation, markets as missiles, precursors as payloads, finance as battle space. The first blow was maritime. The second was financial. The third will be perception, which is why the dull details matter more than fireworks, timestamps that match across services, FLIR frames with metadata, embedded EW diaries labeled search rather than fire control. The lawful ladder climbed one rung at a time, hail, show, record, reposition, so that when force appears, it is bounded, brief, and provable. By sunrise, the smoke thins to a bruise on the sky. Hamilton ghosts through a field of debris, calm, steady, unshaken. While below deck, the cataloging continues. Drums, drives, composite shards, serials, photos of lithium cores, plated like batteries in a cathedral. On a whiteboard, a single sentence in block capitals. The next war may not begin with soldiers. It may begin with cargo. Back at sea level, Spencer watches the horizon unspool and says the line he wants the crew to remember when the story gets retold without the quiet parts. This started with a shipment, he tells them, but it ends with a message. The XO nods as if he's counting beats. That America won't fight shadows, he answers, but the hands that cast them. The camera can linger now on the flag, on the wake, on faces that look like people who slept short and did everything right. What happened in these hours will be written up as a seizure. It was not. It was a boundary redrawn by professionals who refused to shout. There is no safe harbor for those who poison a republic and call it business. The sea remembers. The mission continues. When America is threatened, justice sails with the tide, and the tide tonight is ours.